What's the fun fact you use during icebreakers? Story 1. Whenever my daughter has to tell a fun fact, on the first day of school she says she was named after Thomas Jefferson. He was named a long time ago and she was named after him. Story 2. I have 120 plus first cousins. Answering a couple questions. These are direct first cousins. The older siblings had 10 to 14 kids each. The younger seem to have figured out either birth control or self-control. My mom and her siblings all had the same mom and dad. My dad and his siblings all had the same mom and dad. Story 3. I was a witness on an episode of Judge Judy. I had some pretty awful neighbors and a very kind landlord, so I came along to be a witness to their property destruction and drug use. They ended up cutting the few things I said, so I got the full experience and none of the notoriety. Judy is a lot shorter that she looks on TV BTW. Edit. It's season 22, episode 198 for anyone who wants to check it out. Hazmat cleanup, drug use, and the police? I'm the nervous-looking white guy sitting behind the old white guy landlord. Story 4. I met and talked to a couple of lawyers who had had cases in her, then real, court. According to them, the version on TV was a very decoff watered-down mellowed-out version of her. That just blew my mind, lol. Ironically, they did say she was an excellent judge and one of them suspected she had a eidetic memory based on certain ways she was able to recall details in the files without looking at them. Story 5. The suffix, which, is an Anglo-Saxon word meaning, place that has salt. English towns with the suffix used to be salt producers. It's actually a merger of two Old English/Anglo-Saxon words that were identical in their root forms. They were different grammatical genders and inflected differently, though. WIC meaning, town, village, camp, and WIC meaning, inlet, creek, small bay. The place with salt meaning developed after the Old English period, out of the second one. The second one is also cognate with the Vic element in Old Norse Vikingur, which was loaned into English as Viking, even though Old English already had a cognate for that, Wising. And the Anglo-Saxon WIC that meant town, village, camp, was a loan word from the Latin word vicus, which was the term for a civilian settlement that developed outside a Roman fort. So, English towns with a wic or wich suffix, in addition to later salt manufacture, frequently have roots stretching back into the Roman period as settlements that survived the disappearance of the associated fort and were still standing in Anglo-Saxon times. Story 6. In Great Britain from the 1500s until 1901 there was a position in the royal household of official royal butt wiper. It was a knighted position. Amongst all of the knights who had fought many battles there was that one guy whose sole function was to wipe the king's ass every day. Story 7. The papal conclave, the vote thingy to decide who's pope, in 1294 took so long that some hermit dude named Pietro sent a letter telling the cardinals to hurry the fuck up or God is gonna smite their holy asses. The cardinals, who were also low-key fed up of fighting between themselves, were like, okay then, you should be pope. We shall now call you Celestine V. And Pietro was like, oh shit. He ran away. The other cardinals were like, no, Celestine, don't do that, and crowned him. Pietro spent a few months then made a decree saying popes can resign, also stop calling me Celestine for fuck's sake, then ran away. Then the cardinals threw him in prison and he died. Poor bastard. Story 8. So if you are at dinner, and there is a bottle of A1 sauce on the table. Look at the label, on the front it states EST 1862. 1862 was the bloodiest year of the American Civil War. Somebody out there in the middle of the war was like, you know what we need right now? Some steak sauce. Asterisk, this is from a comedian but I can't remember who. So props to that guy for noticing because it's hilarious. Story 9. I once had a team that brought up the question, how many shoes do each of us have? It opened up a lot of discussion about what types of shoes, how many they have of each, brands, etc. It was neat because it spurred other topics like walking, running, hiking, etc. Story 10. As a bartender, I had a regular who would send a corn dog, cheapest item on our menu, food or drink, to cute girls at the other end of the bar. If they ate the corn dog, he had an opener. If they rejected the corn dog, he knew they sucked and he was only out $2.50. Story 11. 3 species experience menopause: humans, orcas, and elephants. This means they've evolved to have a portion of their life where they are unable to procreate. So what do they do with these years that would seemingly be unproductive? They teach the younger generations everything they've learned over the years. These 3 species have developed grandmothers. Story 12. Your brain effectively turns off input from your eyes when you look around. Basically prevents fast motion blur, and the brain just fills in the blank data-wise so we never notice. It just updates any time our eyes stop and focus, which happens more often than we actually notice. Similarly, the brain effectively edits our nose out of our normal day-to-day vision. Story 13. Rhododendron pollen contains a neurotoxin. It's generally harmless by itself, but if you get honey made from mostly/entirely rhododendron pollen, it gets some hallucinogenic properties. It'll also probably make you ill, so it's not a great idea, but still. Hey everyone! If you're loving the content, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos. Also, make sure to click the bell icon so you'll never miss an update. Your support means the world to me. Thanks so much, and now, let's dive back into the stories. Story 14. I used to tell people that the human eye doesn't sense touch, that only the tissues around it so. So if you very lightly touch a person's eye, they won't feel it. My brother used this as an icebreaker with a girl in high school. To prove it, he told her he would lick her eye. He got really close but didn't do it. He said, "See, you didn't feel it. Now you have to lick mine." She did lick his. They've been married over 20 years now. Story 15. Escalating levels of useless mountain facts. The highest mountain on Earth is Mount Everest on the Nepal-China border. This is pretty common knowledge, but when you think about it, it's kind of useless to know it. The tallest mountain on Earth is Mauna Kea in Hawaii, because its base is at the bottom of the Pacific. I personally feel like it's kind of cheeky, but it checks out. Neither of these mountains are the furthest point from the center of the Earth because they're at somewhat high latitudes and the Earth bulges slightly at the equator. The furthest point from Earth's center is actually Chimborazo, the highest mountain in Ecuador. You might think the furthest point from Earth's center would also be the point with the lowest surface gravity, but that point's actually Huascarán, the highest mountain in Peru. G is roughly equal to 9.76 meters per square second at Huascarán summit. Finally, it turns out that Earth's axis of rotation doesn't go through its center, so the point furthest from this axis, and thus the fastest point on Earth, is the summit of Cayambe, also in Ecuador. Story 16. In college, Chevy Chase was a drummer in a band called the Leather Canary. After Chase left college and eventually started on SNL, the other band members would then form Steely Dan. The name Steely Dan comes from a prosthetic phallus in William S. Burroughs' novel Naked Lunch. The name may have also been meant to evoke themes of falsehood, ersatzness, and masculinity, which became central to the band's music. The timeline may be a little wrong in this comment because I'm just recalling from what I read about it. Story 17. In the winter, turtles breathe out their butts. They hibernate underwater and exchange gas through their skin. The largest area of skin allowing for this exchange is their derriere. Ice can burn. Methane gas can get frozen in water. If you put it next to a flame, the methane evolving off the ice ignites, causing more ice to melt and more methane to evolve and fuel the fire. Story 18. Sometime I use this, but it's a bit long and to tell it right takes a bit of time. I took down a car theft/stolen ID ring. I got carjacked when selling a used car. The carjackers used a real phone, not burner, to text/communicate with me, and their number was still working. A few days later I texted them that I would pay $XX to get the car back. They replied and we negotiated a deal. I had to use a specific money transfer service which gave me a receipt of the transaction. Prior to sending I knew I could call them and get information about the pickup. A few minutes after money sent I called and found out specifically where they picked up the money. Then called the PD of that city, provided all the info on the perps, the cars, etc. Went to bed and awoke next morning to a call. PD found my car. 10 minutes later got another call, they have 5 suspects in custody. Best money I have ever spent, car back, proved my wife wrong that I was an idiot for sending the money. 5 dudes charged and convicted of aggravated robbery, plus many other felonies, getting 5+ years in state prison, and one hell of a story for life. Story 19. I go between. My aunt almost went on a date with Richard Ramirez, and my great-grandfather worked the Zodiac case when he worked for OPD. And sometimes I'll throw out, the reason they point with 2 fingers in Disneyland/World is because they said Walt preached that it's more respectful than one, when in fact Walt pointed with 2 fingers because he would walk around Disneyland chain smoking and therefore constantly had a cigarette in his hand, and he also was constantly pointing out deficiencies to nearby workers. When smoking went out of fashion in the late 80s/early 90s, they airbrushed all the cigs out of the photos of him. Story 20. Mike Tyson once installed a window air conditioner unit for my grandmother. Edit. In case anyone is curious, my grandmother knew Cus D'Amato, Tyson's original trainer. My grandfather had died several years prior to this incident, which probably happened in 1984 or so. My grandmother couldn't lift the air conditioner to put it in the window and mentioned it to Cus. Cus said he'd send one of his guys over to install it for her, and he sent Mike Tyson, who hadn't had a professional fight yet and was still an unknown.
Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe.